I can still smell it. That mix of motor oil, cut grass, and freedom that hung in the air every June morning in 1984. The kind of smell that told you summer had officially arrived in our little corner of Indiana, where nothing much happened except everything that mattered. My name's Mike, and I was 14 that summer. 14 and convinced I knew everything about the world, which is to say, I knew absolutely nothing. But man, did it feel good to be that clueless. It was a Tuesday when I first saw it. Dad's old 1976 Ford Granada, sitting in our driveway like a rusted-out promise. Burnt orange paint that had seen better days, one hubcap missing, and a dent in the passenger door that told stories Dad refused to share. But to me, it might as well have been a Corvette. "She's all yours if you can get her running," Dad said, sipping his morning coffee on the porch. He didn't even look up from his newspaper. That's how dads were back then. They didn't make grand gestures. They just dropped life-changing bombs between sports scores and weather forecasts. I nearly choked on my Frosted Flakes. Seriously?
Seriously. He folded the paper, finally meeting my eyes. "But I'm not paying for parts. You want her running, you earn the money. Deal?" Did I mention I loved my dad? Because right then, standing in my worn-out Metallica t-shirt and cut-off jeans, I loved that man more than I could put into words. Deal! Have you ever wanted something so bad you could taste it? That's what that car meant to me. Freedom, independence, the open road stretching out ahead, promising adventures that our sleepy neighborhood couldn't contain. I ran inside and called Tommy, then Rick, and even Jenny Morrison, though I tried to play it cool about that last one. Within an hour, my whole crew was standing in my driveway, circling that Granada like it was something sacred. "Dude, it's a piece of junk," Tommy said, but he was grinning. We all were. Because even junk meant possibility when you were 14. Rick popped the hood, and we all pretended to know what we were looking at. We didn't, not really. Sure, we'd watched our dads tinker with engines on Saturday mornings, but watching and doing are two different things entirely. "Alternator's probably shot," Rick said, with the confidence of someone who just learned the word alternator. Jenny laughed, this light musical sound that made my stomach do weird things. "You guys have no idea what you're doing, do you?" "Absolutely not," I admitted, and something about that honesty made her smile wider.
Those were the days when you learned by doing, or more accurately, by screwing up and trying again. No YouTube tutorials, no smartphones to Google how to fix a 1976 Granada. Just you, a Chilton's manual from the library, and pure teenage determination. Remember when problems were that simple? When your biggest worry was finding $35 for a new alternator? I got a job the next day at Morrison's Hardware. Yes, Jenny's dad's store, which was either fate or my teenage heart being extremely transparent. $5 an hour, 3 days a week, sweeping floors and organizing paint cans. Mr. Morrison was a tough man, the kind who'd fought in Vietnam and came back different. But he had kind eyes when he looked at me. "You're the kid trying to fix that old Granada, aren't you?" he asked on my first day. "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly, like he was remembering something far away. "Had a Granada myself once, 75. Drove it cross-country after the war." He paused, staring at a spot on the wall that only he could see. Some of the best memories of my life happened in that car. Isn't it funny how objects become time capsules? How a beat-up car can hold entire universes of memory? The summer took on a rhythm after that. Wake up at 7, ride my bike to the hardware store, work till noon, then spend the afternoon under that Granada with Tommy and Rick. Jenny would come by sometimes, sitting on our porch steps with her Walkman, supposedly doing summer reading, but mostly just watching us fail repeatedly. "You know the battery cables are backward, right?" she said one afternoon, not even looking up from her book. "We've been trying to start that car for 2 hours." What? I crawled out from under the hood, covered in grease and frustration. She finally looked up, pushing her sunglasses into her hair. Positive to negative, negative to positive. You've got them switched. Tommy and Rick stared at each other. I felt my face go red, but not from embarrassment, from something else I couldn't name yet. How did you? My dad, she shrugged. He taught me stuff. Figured if boys could learn it, so could I. She was right, of course. She was right about a lot of things that summer. We switched those cables, and when that engine finally turned over, that beautiful, rattling, imperfect sound of mechanical life, we all screamed. My mom came running out of the house thinking someone was hurt. Mrs. Chen from next door peeked over the fence. Even Mr. Patterson, the grumpy old veteran who yelled at everyone, came out to his porch.
And they all smiled because they remembered. They remembered what it felt like to be young and make something work with your own two hands. Do you remember your first car? That feeling when the engine finally caught? But getting it running was just the beginning. The Granada needed work, lots of it. The brakes were spongy, the steering pulled left, the radio only worked if you hit the dashboard at exactly the right angle, and the air conditioning? Well, we called that rolling down the windows. Dad helped, sometimes, in his way. He'd wander out with a beer after work, make a comment like, might want to check the brake fluid, then wander back inside. That's how he taught. Subtle suggestions that let you think you figured it out yourself. Mom, on the other hand, was direct. You better not be planning to drive that death trap without me checking it first. She was a nurse at County General, and she'd seen enough teenage car accidents to fill a medical textbook. But even she couldn't hide her smile when she saw how hard we were working. The neighborhood became part of it too. Old Mr. Patterson, turns out, had been a mechanic in Korea. He'd shuffle over some afternoons, never asking if we needed help, just starting to do things. Adjusting a belt here, tightening a hose there, muttering things like, "Kids these days don't know what real cars are." But he kept coming back.
Mrs. Chen brought us lemonade and those almond cookies she made. "You boys working so hard," she'd say in her broken English, smiling like we were doing something important. And maybe we were. That's the thing about small-town America back then. Everyone was in everyone else's business, but in the best way. Your neighbors knew your name. They cared when you succeeded. They showed up with tools and advice and cookies. When's the last time you knew all your neighbors' names? By mid-July, the Granada was actually drivable. Not pretty, not perfect, but drivable. Dad took me to the DMV for my learner's permit, a process that involved a written test I'd studied for all week and a vision test that I nearly failed because I was so nervous. "Relax," the DMV lady said. She was maybe 50 with big glasses and bigger hair. "It's just a permit, honey. You act like it's the keys to the kingdom." But that's exactly what it was. Dad let me drive home. 5 miles of pure terror and joy. My hands at 10 and 2, just like the manual said. Dad occasionally reaching for the oh-crap handle above his door, but never actually grabbing it. "You're doing fine," he said quietly as we turned onto our street. "Better than I did on my first drive." I wanted that moment to last forever. Just me and Dad, the late afternoon sun streaming through the windshield, the radio playing some Creedence Clearwater Revival song, everything perfect and simple and right.
Those are the moments you don't know are precious until they're gone, aren't they? Tommy got his permit the same week. Rick was still 14, but convinced he could drive better than both of us. And Jenny? She'd had her permit since April, which meant she was basically a professional in our eyes. We made a plan. Once I had my full license, in 6 months, we'd take a road trip. Nothing crazy, just to Lake Michigan, maybe. 2 hours away, but it might as well have been California for how exotic it felt. "We'll camp on the beach," Rick said, dreamy-eyed. "Build a bonfire, stay up all night." "My parents will never let me," Jenny said, but she was smiling like she wanted them to. "Mine either," I admitted, "but we got 6 months to wear them down." Have you ever planned something with your friends that felt more real than reality? That's what that road trip became. Our shared dream. The thing we talked about every time we worked on the Granada, every time we hung out at the Dairy Queen, every time we sat on someone's porch steps as the sun went down. The summer nights were the best. After dinner, we'd all drift to whoever's house had the best porch situation, usually Rick's because his parents had a screened-in porch that kept the mosquitoes out. We'd play cards, talk about nothing and everything, listen to the radio when the reception was good enough. Tommy was convinced he'd be a rock star. He'd just gotten a bass guitar from a pawn shop and could play exactly 3 notes. Rick wanted to be a pilot. Jenny talked about being a veterinarian. And me? I just wanted to drive. Didn't matter where, just drive.
You know what I love about driving? I said one night, the 4 of us sprawled across Rick's porch furniture like we owned the world. It's like time stops. It's just you and the road and whatever's in your head. That's deep, man, Tommy said, but he wasn't making fun. That's actually deep. Jenny looked at me in a way that made my heart race. I get it, she said softly. Sometimes you need to move to feel still. Did you have friends like that? The ones who just got it? August came in hot and humid, the kind of weather where the air feels thick enough to swim through. The Granada's lack of air conditioning became less of a joke and more of a survival situation. We tried every trick, hanging wet towels over the vents, driving faster to get more wind, even that stupid trick Tommy read about, putting ice in a cooler with a fan. Nothing worked. We just sweated and pretended we didn't mind. But that's how it was back then, wasn't it? You didn't have every comfort. You just dealt with it. I'd saved enough from Morrison's Hardware to put new tires on the front. $68 for both, which meant 3 weeks of sweeping floors and organizing shelves. Dad drove me to the Firestone on Route 9 and I paid cash. Actual dollar bills I'd earned myself. The guy at the counter didn't even look twice. A kid buying tires with his own money? That was just normal. When's the last time you paid for something big with cash you'd saved? Remember how that felt, counting out those bills?
The tires made a huge difference. The Granada stopped pulling left, and Dad finally agreed I could take it out of our immediate neighborhood. Stay in town, he warned, and if that temperature gauge goes above the halfway mark, you pull over immediately. Engine's old, don't push it. I nodded like I understood what that meant. I didn't, not really, but I'd figure it out because that's what you did. My Walkman died that week. Just stopped working mid-cassette while I was mowing Mrs. Patterson's lawn for $5. 1 second, Def Leppard was playing Photograph, and the next, nothing but the sound of the mower and my own disappointment. I tried everything. New batteries, taking it apart with a screwdriver, even hitting it like the TV when it got fuzzy. Nothing. Those things cost $30 new. I had about 12 in my savings jar after the tires. I was devastated in that teenage way where everything feels like the end of the world. Did your Walkman ever eat your favorite tape or just die on you when you needed it most? That specific heartbreak of technology failing before you could afford to replace it. Tommy had the same model Walkman, and his had chewed up his Van Halen tape the month before. Rick still worked, but the fast-forward button stuck, so he had to listen to every song whether he wanted to or not. We all had these problems. Everyone did. Technology wasn't reliable back then. It was just what you had. Just save up for another one, Mom said, which was the answer to everything. Need new sneakers because yours have a hole? Save up. Want to see a movie? Save up. That new Atari game everyone's talking about? Save up.
There was no instant gratification. You wanted something, you waited. You worked, you earned it. I picked up extra hours at Morrison's Hardware. Mr. Morrison had me working the paint counter now, which meant mixing custom colors and pretending I knew the difference between eggshell and cream. The paint mixer was this loud, violent machine that shook cans until the colors blended. Sometimes they'd leak and splatter everywhere, and I'd spend 20 minutes cleaning dried paint off the machine and myself. "You're doing good work," Mr. Morrison said one afternoon, watching me help old Mrs. Fletcher decide between 2 nearly identical shades of white. "Most kids your age can't talk to adults. They get all nervous and weird.
You actually listen." That compliment carried me through the whole week. But the best part of working there? The phone behind the counter. When business was slow and Mr. Morrison went to lunch, I'd call Jenny. We had already talked the night before on the phone in my kitchen while Mom gave me looks about tying up the line, but I'd call anyway. "Morrison's Hardware, how can I help you?" she'd answer, laughing because she knew it was me. "Yeah, I need help finding something. My heart. I think I lost it somewhere around aisle 3. "Oh my God, that's terrible," she'd groan, but she was smiling. I could hear it through the phone. Remember when phone calls were events? When you had to time them around when your siblings weren't using the line? When you'd stretch that curly cord as far as it would go trying to find privacy? When you'd talk for hours about nothing because you had literally talked in person just 2 hours before?
The cord in our kitchen stretched from the wall phone all the way to the pantry if you really yanked it. That's where I'd hide, sitting on the floor between the Cheerios and the canned vegetables, talking to Jenny in what I thought was privacy, until Mom would yell, "Mike, are you done yet? I'm expecting a call." "5 more minutes. You said that a half hour ago." Every house had this fight, every single one. Tommy got grounded for a week because his phone call to some girl from school blocked his dad's boss from getting through. "What if it was an emergency?" his dad yelled. And Tommy tried to explain that it was an emergency. It wasn't. And that whole thing became neighborhood legend. Did your parents yell at you about the phone? Did you master the art of the whispered conversation? Did you know exactly how far that cord could stretch? One Thursday night, we finally convinced our parents to let us go to the movies without adult supervision. It took weeks of negotiating. Tommy's mom was the hardest to crack, but eventually even she agreed, probably just to get some peace and quiet. Ghostbusters had been out for a few weeks, but none of us had seen it yet. Everyone at school talked about it non-stop. The kids who'd already seen it had this superior air about them, quoting lines we didn't understand yet, making inside jokes we weren't part of.
We felt like we were being left behind by our own generation, which sounds dramatic but was very real when you're 14. Rick's older brother drove us to the Cinema 6 at the mall. The theater had those marquee lights that were missing random letters, so it read Ghostbusters in flickering bulbs. The lobby smelled like artificial butter and carpet cleaner. The arcade in the corner was packed with kids pumping quarters into Pac-Man and Galaga. Tickets were $4 each, large popcorn was $2.50. We pooled our money like we were planning a bank heist, counting out wrinkled ones and quarters on the counter while the teenage cashier looked at us with dead eyes. Did you ever pool money with friends to afford something? Counting change in the parking lot, hoping you had enough? We got seats in the middle section, not too close, not too far back, the perfect spot that everyone fought for. The theater was packed, mostly teenagers, everyone buzzing with that pre-movie energy. The lights dimmed and everyone cheered. Then the previews started, and we watched trailers for Red Dawn and The Karate Kid and some other movies that looked incredible. Remember when previews felt as exciting as the actual movie? When you'd talk about them afterward almost as much as the main feature? Ghostbusters was everything we'd heard and more. We laughed so hard we missed jokes. People quoted lines right along with the movie. When that Marshmallow Man showed up, the entire theater lost it. We were part of something. The shared experience of watching something amazing for the first time with hundreds of other people feeling the exact same thing. Walking out of that theater, all of us talking over each other, repeating our favorite lines, that feeling of being in on something finally. You can't replicate that. Netflix and streaming at home, it's convenient, sure, but it's not the same as being in a packed theater with your best friends, becoming part of a cultural moment together. When's the last time you saw a movie that felt like an event, that everyone you knew was talking about?
Rick's brother was late picking us up, like really late, an hour late. We sat outside the mall on the curb, and eventually people stopped asking if we were okay. We didn't have cell phones to call him. The mall payphone took quarters we didn't have left. So we just waited. And it was fine. We just talked about the movie, about school starting in 3 weeks, about nothing important.
3 hours of our lives spent sitting on a curb, and it's one of the clearest memories I have. That happened all the time back then, didn't it? Waiting for rides, waiting for parents who said they'd be there at 8 and showed up at 9:30. You couldn't call them, they couldn't call you. You just waited and hoped, and eventually they'd show up. "Sorry, got caught up," Rick's brother said when he finally arrived, offering no further explanation. And we just got in the car, because what else were you going to do? My Walkman savings got derailed when the Granada's battery died, just completely dead one morning when I tried to start her up. I turned the key and got this pathetic clicking sound that every car owner knows and dreads. Dad came out in his bathrobe, coffee in hand. He listened to that click once and said, "Battery's dead." "Can we charge it?" "Probably too far gone. You'll need a new one." My heart sunk. "How much?" 45 bucks? There went my Walkman fund again.
But here's the thing. I didn't even hesitate. The car needed it, so I'd buy it. That's how it worked. You took care of what you had because getting new things wasn't easy. You maintained, you repaired, you made it last. Remember when you fixed things instead of replacing them? When you actually cared for your possessions because you'd worked so hard to get them? Mr. Morrison gave me a discount at the hardware store, $38 for the battery. I installed it myself with Dad supervising, which meant he stood there drinking coffee and occasionally saying things like, "Tighten that more," or "Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty." When that engine turned over, relief flooded through me. The Granada was alive again. My independence was intact. "You did good," Dad said, and that was his version of a speech. The county fair rolled into town mid-August, and this was the event. For 1 week, our little town transformed. The fairgrounds filled with rides that looked questionable at best, game booths with prizes that definitely weren't worth what you paid to win them, and food that would absolutely wreck your stomach but tasted incredible. I've been thinking about asking Jenny to go, just the two of us. Not as a group, as a date? Was it a date? I didn't know. I'd never done this before. Tommy and Rick gave me conflicting advice. "Just be cool," Tommy said, which was useless because I'd never been cool a day in my life. "Tell her exactly how you feel," Rick countered. "Girls like honesty." "Do they though?" Tommy asked. "I don't know, man. I'm just saying what my brother told me."
I spent Friday afternoon detailing the Granada. Not just a quick clean, a detail. I vacuumed every inch, including under the seats where I found $2 in change and one of Tommy's guitar picks. Wiped down the dashboard, cleaned the windows inside and out with newspaper and Windex, just like Dad taught me. Even tried to do something about the smell with one of those pine tree air fresheners from the gas station. Did you ever clean your car before a date? Really clean it? Trying to make something old and worn look special? Hoping the person would see the effort, not the flaws? The air freshener helped, but let's be honest, the Granada still smelled like the Granada. Old vinyl, a hint of oil, and something else I could never quite identify. But it was clean. It was the best I could do. I picked out my best jeans, the Levi's without any holes or stains, a clean t-shirt, my only polo shirt in case the t-shirt wasn't fancy enough, then back to the t-shirt because the polo felt like I was trying too hard. Spent way too long on my hair with Dad's Brill cream until Mom said I looked like a greaser and made me wash it out and start over. "Just be yourself," Mom said, fixing my collar even though it didn't need fixing. What if myself isn't good enough? She got this look, the one all moms have when their kids say something that breaks their hearts a little. "Mike, any girl would be lucky to spend time with you. Jenny already knows who you are. That's why she said yes." Did your mom give you that talk? Did she fix your collar even when it was already perfect?
Dad handed me $20 for the fare. "Don't spend it all in one place." "Dad, I've got money." "Take it anyway. First date should be on me. That's how my dad did it. That's how I'm doing it." He paused. "And Mike, walk her to the door when you bring her home. Look Mr. Morrison in the eye. thank him for trusting you with his daughter. This was the most Dad had said to me in weeks. I showed up at Jenny's house at exactly 7 p.m. Not 6:58, not 7:02, exactly 7. I'd driven around the block twice to time it perfectly. Mr. Morrison answered the door. He looked me up and down in that way fathers do, seeing everything. My clean shirt, my nervous hands, my freshly washed car in the driveway. "Evening, Mike." "Evening, sir." "You'll have her home by 11? "Yes, sir, absolutely." "And you'll drive safe, no speeding, no showing off?" "Yes, sir." He studied me for another moment, then nodded. "Jenny, Mike's here." She came down the stairs and I forgot how to breathe. She was wearing jeans and a simple white top, nothing fancy, but she looked incredible. Her hair was down and she had on a little makeup. Not much, just enough to make her look older somehow. "Hey," she said, smiling. "Hey," I managed.
The drive to the fairgrounds took 15 minutes, but it felt like both forever and no time at all. The radio played Against All Odds by Phil Collins, and I tried to decide if that was romantic or awkward. We talked about nothing important, the weather, how packed the fair would probably be, whether the tilt-a-whirl was safe or a death trap. Did you ever have a car ride with someone where you both knew something had changed, where every word felt important even though you were just talking about nothing? The fair was exactly as promised. Lights everywhere, music from competing rides, the smell of fried everything. Teenagers trying to look cool, kids on sugar highs, parents with that exhausted but happy look. It was perfect American chaos. We bought tickets, those long strips of red tickets you'd rip off one by one for each ride. $20 got you 30 tickets, which sound like a lot until you realize each ride costs 3 to 5 tickets. "What do you want to do first?" I asked. "Everything," she said. So we did. We rode the scrambler, which spun us until we couldn't stop laughing, the Ferris wheel, where Jenny admitted she was terrified of heights but went anyway, and at the top, when the ride stopped to let other people on, we could see the whole town spread out below us, every street we'd ever walked, every house we'd ever known, all lit up like a constellation. "It looks so small from up here," Jenny said.
Yeah, but down there, it feels like the whole world. Yeah. She looked at me. "Do you ever want to leave? See what else is out there?" "Well, sometimes," I admitted. "But then I think about leaving all this and I don't know. Do you?" "All the time," she said quietly. "I want to see everything, photograph everything. But I'm scared of wanting that, you know? Like wanting more means what we have isn't enough." The Ferris wheel started moving again, and the moment passed. But I thought about what she said for the rest of the night. Have you ever loved where you were but dreamed of somewhere else? That specific tension of being grateful and restless at the same time? We played the games, those rigged carnival games that everyone knows are impossible, but you play anyway, because maybe you'll be the exception. I spent $8 trying to win Jenny a stuffed animal at the basketball toss. The rim was clearly smaller than a regulation basketball, and the ball bounced out every time, but I kept trying, because that's what you did. Finally, on my 15th attempt, one went in. The guy running the booth looked legitimately surprised. Jenny got to pick a prize, this ridiculous purple teddy bear that was way too big and probably cost the carnival 50 cents to make. She hugged it like it was priceless. I love it. Those $8 were absolutely worth it. We ate too much. Funnel cake, corn dogs, cotton candy, and something called a deep-fried Oreo that was disgusting and amazing. My stomach hurt, and I didn't care. We watched the demolition derby, where cars that made the Granada look pristine smashed into each other while everyone cheered, and beer was definitely being consumed despite the no alcohol signs.
Around 10:30, we found ourselves away from the main fair near the 4-H livestock barns. It was quieter there, just the occasional sound of an animal shifting in their pen. We sat on a hay bale, that ridiculous purple bear between us, and the fair continued in the distance like a dream we were part of but also watching. "This was really fun," Jenny said. "Yeah, really fun. We should do it again, like not wait a whole year for the next fair." "Definitely. We could, I don't know, do something. Anytime." I was so smooth. Absolutely the master of romantic conversation. She laughed. "Mike, are you asking me to be your girlfriend?" My face went nuclear red. "I mean, would you want to be?" Instead of answering, she leaned over and kissed me. Quick, soft, and completely devastating in the best way. My first real kiss, tasting like cotton candy and possibility. "I'll take that as a yes," I said when she pulled away. "You're such a dork." But she was smiling. "Do you remember your first kiss? The sweetness of it, the nervousness, how the whole world seemed to stop and spin at the same time?" I got her home at 10:58 p.m., walked her to the door like Dad said. Mr. Morrison was waiting, which I'd expected. "Good time?" he asked. "The best, Daddy," Jenny said, still clutching that ridiculous bear. He looked at me, and something passed between us, an understanding, a trust, a warning, all wrapped into one glance. "Good night, sir. Thank you for trusting me." He nodded. "Drive safe, Mike." On the drive home, I couldn't stop smiling. The radio played something I didn't recognize, but it didn't matter. Everything was perfect. The Granada ran smooth. The night air felt perfect.
The moon was full, and I was 14 and in love in that complete, overwhelming way that only happens when you're 14. When I got home, Dad was still awake, watching Johnny Carson with the sound down low. "Good night?" he asked. "The best." He smiled, understanding everything without needing details. "Get some sleep, son." I went to bed that night thinking about Jenny's kiss, the fair lights, the way she looked at the top of the Ferris wheel, and how sometimes everything just falls into place exactly as it should. Those nights when you're young and everything feels possible, when the future stretches out ahead like an open road and every moment is exactly perfect. Do you remember those? Do you remember believing that feeling would last forever? The last 2 weeks of August carried that bittersweet feeling everyone who's lived through summer knows too well. School supplies started appearing in store windows. Back-to-school sales dominated the TV commercials between cartoons. The air itself felt different somehow, like even the weather knew something was ending. Jenny and I spent almost every day together, not officially dating in the way kids do now with posts and pictures and announcements. We just were together. Everyone knew, nobody made it weird. That's how it worked back then. Things happened naturally, without needing labels or documentation or approval from people who didn't matter. The hardware store got busier as parents realized their kids needed things for school. Paint for bedrooms being repurposed to study spaces, organizational supplies, lock sets for gym lockers. I worked longer hours restocking shelves and mixing paint and learning which screwdriver bit fit which screw head. Mr. Morrison started teaching me inventory management, showing me how to mark things down and track what sold and what didn't. Tommy's Walkman continued eating tapes. He'd lost 3 cassettes to that thing: Van Halen, Def Leppard, and his pride and joy, a dubbed copy of Pink Floyd's The Wall that his cousin made for him. Each time it happened, he tried to save the tape by carefully re-spooling it with a pencil through the sprocket holes, but stretched tape never sounded right again. The music would wobble, the pitch would drift, and eventually he'd just have to accept it was ruined. Technology failing us was just part of life back then. VCRs ate rental tapes. Records skipped if you breathed on them wrong. TV antennas needed constant adjustment, and even then, you might only get 3 channels clearly. Things broke, and you either fixed them yourself, paid someone else to fix them, or did without. There was no customer service number to call, no replacement shipped overnight, no reviews to read before buying. You just dealt with it. Did your tape deck eat your favorite cassette? Did you try the pencil trick? Did you ever get a tape so tangled you just had to throw it away? The community pool became our default hangout spot for those final summer days. The water was somehow colder in late August than it had been in July, like the pool itself was preparing for winter. The concrete edges were hot enough to burn your feet, creating that desperate hop-run from towel to water that everyone did but pretended they didn't need to do. We'd spend entire afternoons there, swimming until our fingers pruned, playing Marco Polo and chicken fights, and seeing who could hold their breath the longest underwater. The lifeguards were high school kids who mostly just wanted to work on their tans and flirt with each other, only blowing their whistles when someone did something genuinely dangerous, which was pretty often. Rick almost broke his arm diving into the shallow end, even though there were literally signs everywhere saying not to dive in the shallow end. He surfaced with this surprised look, his arm already swelling, and tried to play it off like he was fine. Tommy had to convince him to go to the first aid station, where they gave him ice and called his mom. She showed up furious, not at the pool but at Rick for being stupid, which was the appropriate response.
Tommy once spent $5 trying to beat the high score on Galaga, $5 in quarters, which was 20 games, and he never even came close. The high score had been set by someone with the initials ACE, and it seemed impossible, superhuman, like something no normal person could achieve. We'd stand there feeding quarters into machines, dying repeatedly, watching other people play who were actually good, and feeling simultaneously frustrated and determined. The best players had crowds watching them. There was this unspoken hierarchy in the arcade, the kids who could actually play versus the kids who just wasted quarters. If you could make a quarter last more than 5 minutes, people noticed. If you could reach levels most people never saw, you were basically famous within those 4 walls. Did you ever get a crowd watching you play? Or were you in the crowd watching someone else achieve what you couldn't? One kid at our arcade could play Pac-Man for hours on a single quarter. Hours! He'd just stand there, chewing gum, barely moving, navigating those mazes like he'd memorized every pattern. People would gather around, watching, not even playing their own games, just witnessing something exceptional. Nobody knew his real name. Everyone just called him Pac-Man Pete, and he was a legend. We never reached those heights. We were the kids who fed quarters into machines and died quickly and tried again anyway, because what else were you going to do on a Tuesday afternoon when it was too hot to be outside? The arcade also had pinball machines along the back wall, and these were Rick's specialty. He had the touch somehow, that perfect combination of reflexes and timing that kept the ball alive. The rest of us would tilt the machine within 30 seconds. Rick could make a game last 15 minutes, the bells and lights going crazy, his score climbing higher and higher while we watched and occasionally offered useless advice.
Pinball was the original video game, and it was unforgiving. 3 balls, no continues, no save points, no tutorials. You either figured it out or you lost, and a machine took your quarter either way. It didn't care about your feelings or your potential or how hard you were trying. It just was what it was. Kind of like life when you think about it. Labor Day weekend arrived with that strange mix of excitement and dread. One last party before school started. One final grasp at summer before responsibilities returned. Every family in the neighborhood seemed to be having a cookout, and by evening you could smell charcoal and hamburgers from every direction. Our street did a block party. Nothing official, just everyone dragging their grills to the middle of the street, setting up folding tables and lawn chairs, and letting the kids run wild until the streetlights came on. Someone always brought a boombox, and music would compete with the sound of kids playing and adults talking and the sizzle of meat on grills. The dads stood around in their standard uniform, shorts, white athletic socks pulled up high, polo shirts or faded t-shirts from places they'd been or events they'd attended years ago. They'd drink beer from cans, talk about work and sports and lawn care and politics in that easy way men have when they're with their tribe. They'd flip burgers and hot dogs, argue about whose marinade recipe was better, compare notes on their cars and their tools and their kids. The moms congregated in their own groups, bringing potato salad and coleslaw and desserts that were always amazing. They'd talk about school starting, about their jobs, about their families, about everything and nothing, their conversations overlapping and weaving together in ways that somehow everyone could follow.
And the kids ran everywhere. Younger kids playing tag and hide and seek. Older kids trying to look too cool for games but eventually joining in anyway. Teenagers hovering in their own groups, trying to establish their independence while still being fundamentally kids at a neighborhood party. Do you remember block parties? When entire streets became communities for an evening? When you knew everyone's name and everyone knew yours? The food was never fancy. Burgers, hot dogs, chips, the same sides everyone made for every cookout, but it tasted perfect because of where you were and who you were with and the knowledge that this was it, the last night of summer before everything changed again. Jenny and I sat on my driveway, away from the main crowd but still part of it, watching everything unfold. The Granada was parked behind us, still warm from an afternoon drive. The sun was setting in that slow, golden way that only happens in late summer, stretching shadows across the street and painting everything orange and pink. School started Wednesday, 2 days away. We'd be sophomores, which felt impossibly old and impossibly young at the same time. The summer had been perfect, and now it was ending, and there was nothing we could do about it, except watch it go. That's the thing about being young that nobody tells you until you're old enough to look back. You're always saying goodbye to summers, to moments, to versions of yourself that will never exist again. You're always moving forward, whether you're ready or not. Did you feel that as a kid? That sense of time slipping away even as you were living it? The Granada had become more than just a car over the summer. It was freedom, identity, possibility. Every scratch and dent told a story. The smell of it, that mix of old vinyl and oil and something undefinable, had become comforting. The way the engine sounded when it first started, that rough idle that smoothed out after a minute. The pole to the left that I'd learned to compensate for automatically. The radio that worked perfectly except for FM stations below 95, which would fade in and out for no reason.
I knew every quirk, every flaw, every personality trait of that machine. It wasn't just transportation, it was mine in a way that nothing else had ever been mine. I'd earned it, fixed it, maintained it, and it had given me the summer of my life. The adults started packing up around 9, which meant the party was winding down. Kids were called home, grills were wheeled back to garages, folding tables and chairs disappeared. The street slowly returned to normal, though you could still smell the charcoal and see the scuff marks on the asphalt where the party had been. Rick and Tommy came over to say goodnight. We didn't talk about school starting or summer ending. We just stood there in my driveway, the three of us, not needing to say the things we were all thinking. Eventually they left. Jenny's dad called her home. The street went quiet, except for the sound of crickets and the distant hum of air conditioners. I sat in the Granada for a while, not going anywhere, just sitting. The dome light was on, casting a weak yellow glow. The keys hung in the ignition. My learner's permit was tucked in the sun visor,
waiting for the day it would become an actual license. In 6 months, I'd be able to drive anywhere I wanted without supervision. Lake Michigan was still the plan. Me, Tommy, Rick, and Jenny, a road trip to somewhere that felt far away but was really just 2 hours north. It seemed impossibly distant, but also right around the corner. That's what 15 does to time. Everything feels both forever and tomorrow. School started on a Wednesday morning with that familiar smell of new notebooks and sharpened pencils and floor wax. The building felt both exactly the same and completely different. We were sophomores now, which meant we weren't the youngest anymore, but we also weren't even close to being the oldest.
The hallways were loud with reunions and stories about summers. Everyone had something to share. Vacations to somewhere, time at a lake, visiting relatives, getting their first job, their first girlfriend or boyfriend, their first whatever. We all tried to act like our summers had been the most interesting, the most important, while simultaneously being desperate to hear about everyone else's. I saw Jenny between second and third period. She was standing at her locker, and when she saw me, her face lit up in a way that made every single person in that hallway disappear. We had exactly 3 minutes before the bell, and we used every second. The Granada sat in the student parking lot, one of the older cars among the hand-me-downs and beaters that made up the sophomore section. The seniors had their own area with nicer cars, or at least less beaten-up cars. But I didn't care. The Granada was there, and it was mine. And just knowing it was waiting for me made the school day tolerable. After school, the 4 of us would pile in and just drive. Not far, just around town, maybe to the Dairy Queen, maybe to the park, maybe just in circles. It didn't matter where. What mattered was the freedom, the being together, the music on the radio and the windows down, letting the early September air blow through. The summer was over, but something had started that felt bigger than a season. We had the whole school year ahead of us. We had plans for homecoming and basketball games and winter break and spring and eventually next summer. We had dreams about college and careers and lives we couldn't quite imagine, but knew we wanted. And we had right now, this moment of being young and together and believing that everything good that had happened would keep happening, that this feeling would last, that we'd always be exactly who we were in that car on that September afternoon. Looking back now, decades later, I can see how young we were, how little we knew, how much would change. But I can also see how perfect it was, how summer of 1984 was exactly what summer should be, full of work and play and friendship and first love and old cars and simple pleasures and the kind of freedom you don't appreciate until it's gone.
The Granada lasted another 3 years before the transmission finally gave out. Mr. Morrison hired me full-time after graduation. Jenny went to college in California and became that travel photographer she dreamed about. Tommy never became a rock star, but he still plays bass in a weekend band. Rick flies for a regional airline. And me, I stayed in town, took over the hardware store when Mr. Morrison retired, and raised my own kids on the same streets where I grew up. But that summer, that perfect, impossible summer when everything was new and possible and right, that stays with you. The smell of motor oil and cut grass, the sound of gravel under tires, the taste of pool water and cheap popsicles, the feeling of driving with no destination, music playing, your best friends beside you, and the whole world stretching out ahead like an open road. Do you remember your perfect summer? The one that defined everything that came after? The people, the places, the moments that seemed ordinary then, but became sacred in memory? That's what 1984 was for me. That's what the Granada gave me. That's what being young and free and alive felt like before life got complicated. And sometimes, on late summer evenings when the air smells right and a certain song comes on the radio, I'm back there, 14 years old, driving a beat-up Ford Granada,
believing that moments like this would last forever. They don't last. Nothing does. But God, they were beautiful while they were here.